Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Simplifying Life with Kashira. Today, I have absolute pleasure of speaking with this exceptional guest. His name is Bob De Pasquale, and he's also known as the Generosity Guy. Welcome, Bob, to the show.
Kashira, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Always appreciate your insights on life and fulfillment and joy. So when you asked me to be on the show, I thought it'd be great. So I'm pretty excited today for our conversation and looking forward to talking.
Thank you so much. And I don't know if I should say I'm equally excited or more than that, because the topic you talk about, generosity, about kindness, and these are the topics that deeply resonate with me. And I truly believe that even one act of kindness can change the life of both the giver and taker. It has
hmm
such a profound impact. And what better than to hear it and understand it from the expert, you, Bob? So let's get this conversation kick-started. And I'd love to hear from you that were you always into generosity? What got you on this journey of inspiring people to talk and practice generosity?
well, thank you for the question. I don't know if I would call myself an expert. I like to call myself a generosity enthusiast. I don't know if you can ever be an expert, but I do spend a lot of time thinking about it, and it's an important part of my life because I believe that it saved my life when I was just 18 years old. So I can share with you and everyone out there a little bit about is, and I'm glad you highlighted this, is that giving is not a one-sided thing. A simple act of kindness, yes, and I believe kindness is one foundational piece of generosity, is that it can absolutely change someone's world. I heard when I was a young person, even before my story that I'll share with you here shortly, but even before that story, I was at a concert, and the lead singer of the band that was there in the middle of the show, you know how sometimes the singers in the middle of a concert that they'll stop and talk a little bit. You can only sing for so long and play music, so you got a 2 hour 3 hour concert, and they share some thoughts on life or whatever it might be. And he said, this next song is about a topic to me that is very important. And he talked about making the world a better place, and he ended his little monologue, and he said this one quote always stuck with me, and he said, "You may not change the world, but you may change the world for one." And it really stuck with me I was probably 15 years old maybe at that point, so it's been with me for decades, and I didn't quite understand what it meant maybe at the time, and even years later I didn't, but more recently in my life I've started to figure that out, that I always say that generosity is a mindset and not an event. It's not just one big thing. It's not like you change the world overnight, or you donate a bunch of money, or you do one specific thing for a group of people, you solve world hunger. It's about those little small acts consistently over time, and it's about building the mindset. So that quote really stuck with me. It's not about trying to figure out how you could change the entire world in one way. It's about doing one small thing for one person. So that's when I was first exposed to it. But I'll dive into my story and how it really saved my life. But ever since then, I guess you could say ever since those two events, it really has how I think.
Great. Oh, that's so powerful. I'm still stuck on that line that generosity may not change the world, but it can change one world. Amazing. That's
hmm
super. Do you want to take us through that story of what really happened and how you came out of it? What
Yeah,
impact it left on your mind?
would love to. So I'm 18 years old now. I don't know about you, Kashira, but when I was 18 years old, I thought I was invincible. I thought that there was nothing in the world that could take me down. That I was this person that, I wasn't arrogant, but I was a confident kid. I felt like I had some, so I was lucky enough to be able to go to college. and I
Mhm.
was playing sports, and I was a pretty good student. I mean, there's a lot of things going for me, at least
Yeah.
based on what the world tells us are good when you're 18 years old.
Yeah.
Like I said, sports, school, and academics, and competition, and all those things that I thought made me a good person at that time. And it's there's a lot of twists and turns in the story, but essentially, I was going off to university at 18 years old playing American football. Now, I know that I just got off a trip where I learned about, I was mostly in Australia, and they don't play American football in
Uh-huh.
Australia.
Uh-huh.
And you quickly learn how different sports and different things are more important in other areas of the country. But at least where I come from, American gridiron football is like a way of life, especially for young people when you're younger. But anyway, so I went off to school, and the reason why this is relevant is I was in training camp preparing for the season before my freshman year of college. So I I was in a new place. I was trying to prove myself to my new teammates and my new coaches, but I was on top of the world. Like I said, I thought I was invincible. I was in a great place in life, but in a very, very short period of time, I was diagnosed with what I thought was just an injury. I thought I had a muscle pull and I couldn't play sports for a while. I couldn't play football for a while because I was having trouble running. And like I said, very, very long story with twists and turns. But ultimately, in a very, very short period of time, I started going through some more serious tests. And I mean, I had every test in the book: MRIs, ultrasounds, CAT scans, sonograms, you name it. And I went from thinking I was this invincible 18-year-old kid to really worried that what I thought was really important at the time in life, I thought I wasn't going to be able to play football for the season, or at least for a couple of weeks. And when the competition is really high, and when you think that every play, every snap, every little thing counts at that level to prove yourself, when you're playing a higher level of football at that point, you really feel kind of worried. I mean, it really hits you hard. And I thought that, not my life was over, but I thought that there was a major problem. Like my whole plan in life was being ruined. Put it that way. And so I had a bunch of these tests. Now I'll never forget this day. This was a critical day in my life. I would spend hours in these tests, and I'm driving around a strange place by myself. Technically, I'm an adult because I'm 18 years old at this point, but I'm going through some things that most, young adults don't go through. I was driving around to all these strange doctors' offices, having all these weird tests and filling out medical paperwork. I didn't even know the answer to some of these questions. And I thought I had one more test to go through, one more final exam. And it just so happened that on this day, my parents were coming up for my first ever game. Now, we knew that I wasn't playing in the game at this point, but my parents weren't going to cancel their travel plans to come up because I was a 3-hour plane flight away from where I lived growing up. And my parents were coming up, so they decided to keep the trip on and come see me because they knew I was going through a rough time in my life. I mean, I was kind of upset that I wasn't playing, but they were still going to come see me. And they were going to visit my uncle and my aunt and uncle who lived up where I went to school. So I was in this doctor's office, and I expected to be there for a couple hours. So I go into the doctor's office, and the moment I sit down, I mean, I went into the reception area, and I expected to fill out more paperwork and to be sitting there and going through all this whole process. But the moment I walked in and sat down, they called me and said, Bob. They called me Bobby at the time. They said, Bobby. In fact, actually, no, I think they might have called me my full name. They might have said, Robert, come in. And I was, I was a little taken back. I was expected to be there for a while. I walk right into the office. I sit down. 30 seconds later, the doctor comes in, and he sits down right in front of me, and he says, all right, Robert, I got everything we need to know. You have cancer.
Oh God.
And I said, what?
Oh God.
I was expecting him to tell me, you have this pulled muscle. It's going to be 3 weeks. You need surgery. You're whatever. And I didn't even know what to say. I mean, my jaw hit the desk and I just stared at the guy, dead silent. And in my mind, I was thinking, what? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And he said, I know you're probably, he goes, I know you're probably in shock, but take a deep breath. We'll find a way to get treated. You're free to go. And I thought to myself, you're free to go. Like that's something you say to like someone who's in prison, like a convict or someone, I'm not in jail here. I'm free to go. And it just made me feel like so caged, like it literally felt like ironically, he said, you're free to go, but it felt like he put me in this prison of cancer. And so I got up. I don't even think I said anything. And I just walked out of the room, walked out of the reception area, left the building. And the moment I walked out of the building, and this is a critical moment here, I walked out of this strange doctor's office somewhere I'd never been before, and didn't even know what to do, but my phone rang. Now, this was the early stages of cell phones. So I did have one, and my phone rings, and it was my mom. And she said to me, hey, I didn't expect to get you, because she thought I would still be in the doctor's appointment, because we expected it to take a few hours like it normally had. And she says, but we landed, we're on the way to your uncle's house. We're in the car. Just wanted to let you know, I'll see you in a few minutes. I'll see you when you get there. Because I was going to meet her at my uncle's house because he lived up in that area. And she goes, but I have you on the phone. So you might as well tell me, how did the appointment go? And I said to her, well, Mom, about the appointment. And I had to tell her what the doctor told me. And I'll tell you what, Kashira, just as shocked as I was, I'm assuming my mom was, and it was dead silent on the other end of the phone. But I could feel her screaming at the same time, even though she was saying nothing, because I told her I had been diagnosed with cancer. And the only thing that I could hear was my dad on the other end of the phone, and he knew something was wrong too, because he was in the car with her. And I could hear him saying, Susan, what's wrong? My mom's name is Susan. So he was like yelling my mom's name, and she was quiet. And it was just the most awkward silence that I've ever felt in my life. And so we met back at my uncle's house, and I hadn't seen my parents in a month now, because I was up at school and training camp and going through all these tests eventually. And I looked at my parents, and I mean, we gave each other a big hug. We shed some tears. We said some prayers. I mean, it was just the most emotional period, because, I thought honestly that my life was over at this point. I thought my football life was over because I thought I had an injury. Now I thought my life was over because I was diagnosed with cancer, and we just didn't know what to do. So, lucky enough, my uncle, whose house we were staying at, his daughter, my cousin, was really good friends with a girl in school at the time whose dad was an oncologist. So if you make this connection, my cousin's friend's father was an oncologist. And in the area, this is up in New York, which is about 3 hours from where I grew up. And we were trying to decide, like, what am I going to do? Am I going to go home because I have cancer? Am I going to stay in New York where there's good doctors? Well, we decided to stay in New York, and my cousin's friend's father would treat me for cancer. So we talked to him like immediately the next day. Mm-hmm. And we made some appointments, and he was going to figure out what type of cancer I had and go through all this whole process. So that was a Thursday that my parents came up. We talked to the doctor on Friday. Now, Saturday, 2 days later, this is critical, was supposed to be my first ever college game. We knew I wasn't playing in the game at this point, because now not only did I have what we thought was an injury, now we knew that I was diagnosed with cancer, so I wasn't going to play in this game. But my uncle's best friend came over his house. Now, this is where the generosity piece comes in. And we didn't know this guy because we didn't live in New York where my uncle did. But my uncle's best friend comes over his house, and we're still in this state of shock. But he comes in the door, and we're in this small room, like kitchen area where he came in, and he says hi to my aunt and uncle, and he walks directly over to my parents, and he sticks his hand in his pocket, and we're like, what is this guy doing? He pulls his keys out of his pocket, and it looked like Kashira, it looked like he was like shoving them into my parents' face, but he pulls his keys out and he goes, here, Bob and Susan, take my car and use it for whatever you need right now. I can't imagine what you're going through with your son. And my parents were flabbergasted. They were like, what, huh? Like, they didn't even know what to say. But here's this guy that we didn't even know. And I thought to myself, wow, that's the most generous thing someone's ever done for my family and I. I mean, he was just giving us his car, didn't even know who we were. And he was there for maybe 15 minutes. And he said goodbye to my aunt and uncle. And we didn't even know what to say to him. And he left. And he was gone. He was there for 15 minutes. We just met the guy. He gives us his car. And he left. He was gone. And I said to him, I'm looking at my uncle. I'm like, who is this guy? He didn't even know who he is. And my uncle's like, that's Tim. Tim's a generous guy. And he left. So he gave us his car. Now, I'm thinking to myself, there's no reason. I mean, there's a reason that this guy gave us his car, but he didn't have to do that. Like, he could have easily just said, he could have just decided not to come over. Or B, he could have offered to take us somewhere. He could have done a whole bunch of other things, but he actually did something radically generous, just decided to give us the car. And I'll never forget that day. But what was interesting, what makes it even more powerful to me, because that moment wouldn't have really changed my life. It wouldn't have, I don't think I would have been resonated so deeply if not a couple days later, I was coming out of my first ever college class. And now I decided to still take some classes. I could have dropped out of school completely, but the oncologist, my niece's, my cousin's friend's dad said, you can't do nothing while you're sick. That's one of the worst things that you could do. You got to keep your mind, when you're physically sick, you have to keep your mind healthy. So I came out of my first ever college class because I was still enrolled. And this is important because, once again, I'm still in a strange place. And I was in the cafeteria. I was getting something to eat for breakfast that morning after class. And I'm watching the news is on in this little cafeteria that I'm in. Now, I don't know if you remember televisions like back then, but there was one of those old school tube televisions hanging from a bracket.
Yeah.
It's in the corner of the ceiling and the wall, and I'm watching this little television. And I don't know the news station. I mean, I don't live in this area. I don't even watch the news. I'm a teenager. Like, who watches the news? So I'm watching the news, and all of a sudden, it's live television, and a plane hits a building. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, oh no, what a terrible accident. I can't even imagine like going through that. And I called my dad, who was at my uncle's house, and I said, hey Dad, you watching? He goes like, yeah, I'm watching the news. Looks like there was an accident there in Manhattan and in New York City. It's terrible. And we were on the phone for like, no longer than a minute. And all of a sudden, bam, another plane hits another building right next to the one that was originally hit. And we're thinking to ourselves, oh my gosh, this is not an accident. Like, something bad's happening. And it turned out that was September 11th, 2011, when the terrorist attacks happened there in New York City. And I couldn't even believe what was going on. My dad said, you better get in the car and head back to your uncle's house. Like, I don't know, who knows? So I got in the car. I didn't even finish my breakfast. It's probably still sitting there to this day in the cafeteria. I ran to the car. I get in. It was normally a 15-minute drive, Kashira, and it took me 9 hours to drive from school to my uncle's house. And I am in bumper to bumper traffic. And I'm in New York. So like in the very distant background, I have the Twin Towers that were attacked there that day were burning, like smoke and fire in the background. And I listened to the whole thing on the radio. And I since have a master's degree in broadcast journalism. I will never listen to 9 straight hours of AM radio ever again in my life. but it was riveting. I listened to the whole thing, and I pulled off the highway. Thankfully, I made it off the highway, and I ran out of gas in my uncle's neighborhood when I was pulling in, and we had to push my car into his driveway. And we pushed my car into his driveway. I looked at my parents, and I looked at my aunt, and I thought, wow. A couple weeks ago, I thought I was on top of the world, invincible. Then I thought, well, maybe my dream of playing college football is over. Now I think not only is my life over, but maybe the world's coming to an end. And I couldn't believe. We all looked at each other like we were just in shock, and we couldn't get a hold of my uncle. And so finally my uncle calls later that night, and we're still like, the whole neighborhood is flipping out. I mean, people are going crazy. And finally my uncle calls, and my aunt was hysterical because she thought, something happened to him, because he was supposed to fly home from Denver, which is probably maybe a 4 or 5 hour flight from New York. So he was supposed to come home that morning because he was on business. And turns out that he was okay. And he said, guys, I'm fine. My plane got grounded. I know you're probably worried. The phones have been out. I haven't been able to get through, but I'm safe. I'm good. I'm just going to stay in Denver another night. I'll be home tomorrow. We'll figure something out. And we were relieved. But he said, before I let you go, I got to tell you something. And he said, my friend Tim, who you all met just a few days ago, he was in the tower, one of those buildings this morning, unfortunately, and he died. And we were in shock. We could not believe that here's this guy, Tim, who did the nicest thing that someone's ever done for our family. Like, why did he deserve that fate? And it turns out that Tim worked for an investment firm called Cantor Fitzgerald. And they were known for being very generous people at Cantor Fitzgerald. And if anyone wants to see one of the most emotional press conferences ever, go to YouTube, look up Howard Lutnick and Cantor Fitzgerald. They had a couple hundred people that worked in that office in New York City and Manhattan at that time. And Howard was the CEO, founder, president of the organization, and he was the only one not in the office that morning. He typically would be the first one in the office as the leader, but he something silly happened that morning. He had to take his child to school for some crazy reason. He never late. Was late to the office that morning and was the only one that survived. So here's this guy at this press conference talking about it. It's one of the most emotional things you'll ever see. And it's important to think about this situation because Tim was known for saying, have you ever heard of the term, Kashira, people talk about you only live once, YOLO, or they say FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Those are popular terms out there. Well, Tim was known for saying something to the effect of, it's kind of like FOMO, but for generosity. You never know when your last opportunity to be generous will be for someone. And it turns out that Tim's last opportunity to be generous for someone was for my family and I, and he took advantage of it. And so it makes me think that, life, we're not guaranteed time beyond what we have in the moment. And so Tim took advantage of that. And, the Cantor Fitzgerald was so generous that they gave office space to my uncle's foundation. My uncle has a foundation for cystic fibrosis, a disease that my cousin has. Everyone for the foundation that morning would not typically be in the office. The only person that would have been in the office, her name was Tammy, and she was uncharacteristically late, like Howard was for Cantor Fitzgerald that morning. She got caught in the subway underneath the towers there, and she ended up making it out. And the stories that she can tell are also incredibly emotional. But it tells me that for some reason, and we don't know, Tammy and Howard were late that morning, and they're still alive. But for whatever reason, Tim wasn't. And I'm not here to tell why someone wasn't or how short someone's life is. But it tells me that, Tim, we're all going to have an opportunity to do something for someone at some point. And we don't know if that's going to be our last or just another opportunity. So we might as well take advantage of it.
True, true, absolutely. And oh God, may the souls rest in peace of the people who suffered the 9/11 attack and similar ones. You're so right in saying you never know, when is the last breath you're breathing, and when is your last opportunity to be generous for anyone. And at the same time, Bob, situations like this, unfortunate situation like this, it takes away the faith that people have. For example, somebody has been really kind and generous and good with everyone,
Hmm.
really, a nice person, led some beautiful life helping out people. But when such kind of things happen in life, they lose that faith. They're like, what is the point of being good if ultimately something of such nature had to happen to me or to some of our close people?
Hmm.
It's it's very difficult to hold on to that faith and that, what do you call that feeling that, okay, I'll be kind, I'll be helping people when my world is shattering.
Hmm.
And I think I can say it from my own experience, because as I said in starting of the call, that I truly believe in being generous and kind to people. But there have been situations in my life where I had been badly sick, like something that I didn't expect,
Hmm.
really traumatic. And I was like, why had I been so good to people? I've always been so nice. I've been such a nice kid. Why
Hmm.
all the wrong things are happening to me? All those feelings, and then you become very rude or very angry person. And that rudeness is a consequence of your anger, that anxiety, that thing you get filled with. And it took me a lot of time to come out of that phase. And I would say, when I started healing, I started changing again towards positive. But during that phase, it was difficult to be able to hold that, okay, I can still be kind. So what if things are not working good with me?
Hmm. I understand.
Yeah.
I understand that feeling.
And is there anything you'd like to tell to any such person, who may listen to us, anyone who's going through such turbulent situations in their life, that even if your situation may not be good today, but it will be, and that we can still hold on to that ray of hope and continue being generous and kind to others.
Yes, and let me tell you, you don't have to have a story, of tragedy per se to understand this. I mean, there's been other times in my life. I mean, I like to consider myself a generous person, and I try to be kind, but I fall short quite frequently myself. But I'm always reminding myself of that quote that we just talked about a moment ago about change. You may not change the world, but you may change the world for one person. Whether that's in your personal life, with your family, and other communities that you live and work in, at your business, there are the smallest things can be the most meaningful things. And if you get to a situation where you feel like you're in a tough spot, I mean, you're the victim, there's things that are hurting you, once again, whether
Mm.
that's in your personal life or your business life, it can be really easy in today's world uh, to feel like things are against you, because we live in this world of immediacy where everyone can get information immediately on the internet. Dopamine hits are addictive. People are looking for solutions right away. It can be very, very easy to think, man, my solution is not, everyone else is getting solutions and answers and tips, tricks, and hacks for life and business immediately, and for whatever reason, I'm in a tough spot. Yes, I totally understand. It can be easy to get into scenarios like that, but I like to remind myself that the things, the gifts and skills that I've been blessed with, the things that I have, can truly make a difference. I'm in a position in my life, professionally or personally, and I have relationships that I know that I can make a positive impact with. And I think one of the simplest things that you can do, to remind yourself of this, is to ask people questions. Ask them for feedback. Ask what people need. Someone will tell me, well, Bob, I want to get started being generous, or I want to make an impact in the world. The simplest thing is just to ask questions. Hey, how can I help you? What do you need? And someone might not need some special expertise that you have or training that you have. They might just need someone to listen to. They might
Yeah.
they might have there might be no one in their life that has ever asked them a real question like, how are you doing, or what do you need, or doing simple, like you mentioned before, just little things that are kind. So you have to start small. And I think if you start small, you'd be very, very surprised on the impact that you can make in someone's life and throughout the day. And you never know where it will come from either. You know, it might be something simple that you did when you met someone in the line at this. I tell this story about there was one time I was in the line at the supermarket, and this poor woman, she dropped like a whole bunch of her shopping cart was full, and she dropped a bunch of things out of it, and you could tell that she was just flustered, and you could just tell it just was not a good day. If you've ever seen someone in public and they look extremely uncomfortable doing something that's otherwise pretty routine. And I helped the woman, pick a couple things up, put it on the belt there, and help her get checked out. And she was so thankful to me for just doing something simple as that. So I think personally that one of the simplest ways to relieve yourself of your own stresses is to do simple things for other people. When you serve someone else, it really adds perspective to you. Now, I have a couple other stories that I could share about, more, I don't want to say extravagant, but I know the importance of service in our world and how that lives in the realm of generosity. Then I like to talk about those things, but it doesn't have to be going overseas and change, like I said, this big event. It can be simple little acts of service. And so to answer your question, I would say this: if you feel, and this might be counterintuitive, but if you feel like your world's crashing down, or there's situations in your life that you cannot overcome, I would consider finding someone else who may be struggling and asking them some questions and seeing what you can do to help them.
True.
It's not
something to think on.
Yeah, and one other thing, if you're looking for maybe something that's more immediately actionable. So let's say you're not around anyone at the moment, and you're listening to this, and you're struggling with something. Consider writing things down. There's something extremely powerful about journaling, and it could be free form. It could just be writing down what you're thinking, or you'd be surprised. And I'm very, very big on positive self-talk and acknowledging gratitude, acknowledging the things that we have in life. Ever since that time in my life, and obviously I've survived my cancer, and I'm in a pretty healthy person, all things considered now, decades later. But every morning, I'm thankful for the ability to wake up and just be alive. And so I found that taking just a few moments every day to acknowledge the things that I appreciate and that I have that I otherwise wouldn't is critical as well. So I do take time every day to write, to do some journaling, but it doesn't even have to be written. It can just be acknowledgement. And first thing in the morning, wake up before I do anything, before I even get out of bed, sit up and say, you know what? Thank you that I have life, that I'm able to breathe. And that alone is extremely powerful. And then if you do want to take it that next step, I recommend that you write those things down. And you'd be surprised. You might say, well, man, I just wrote down, I'm thankful for my family, or I'm thankful for my house, or I'm thankful for my education or food or whatever it is. You might say, why am I going to write this down every day? It's kind of annoying and repetitive. But I think the more you do it, the more you realize how important or how powerful, how lucky you are to have those things in your life. So if you get to the point where, it's been 2 or 3 weeks and I'm writing the same things down over and over again, I think that's actually a good thing. It's not about more. That's another key thing. Bob, I'm writing the same things repeatedly, and I'm like, well, that's a good thing. It's not about accumulating more good things. It's about acknowledging the good things that you already have. And so if you're writing down my family over and over again, that's tremendous. And that makes me smile.
And to add to that, Bob, I also think that when you're going through a tough situation, any XYZ, one, if you have a good support system, you have friends, you have family to, listen to you, to talk to you, that definitely helps in easing the pain. There are many unfortunate people who lack that as well. They don't, in this world where a lot of people are lonely, they may not get even that kind of a support. Journaling definitely helps that even if you do not have people to talk to, you can talk to your diary, you can talk to your notepad and just write down whatever you're feeling. And that is actually a very strong way of communicating with your pen and paper. And that is something I always advise people that stop complaining that you don't have any people. There are many people who are going through it, but try to see what all resources you could use to lessen your pain. And that's how the journaling helps. The other thing that I felt, from my experience of healing and whatever that mental trauma I went through, it was like, one, definitely journaling is something that got me out. And slowly, what happened was like, I felt more and more my belief in that superpower was increasing. You call it God, you call it subconscious, you call it universe, you call it the energies. The more and more my faith was increasing, I was kind of like believing. I was like, Kashira, you trust in the process. Okay, there's something superpower who's sitting there, something that's working, and something best will happen with you. It's okay. And whatever traumatic situation you're going through, there is definitely something better coming out of it. A
Mm-hmm.
thought, an injection of thought like that really has pulled me out of so many of these situations. I'm very thankful that God has, given me so much. But I just feel that I feel so ready, kind of mentally ready, because I have that strong faith in something. And I'm like, everything is fine. Anything negative happens, there's definitely something best coming out of that. And that just keeps you strongly grounded, that keeps you complete. And that feeling, yeah, it just keeps you protected from all such negative feelings and situations. So this is, along with what you said, this is another piece that I'd like to tell people, that find your ways of keeping yourself grounded and have that faith in that superpower that is there. Whatever you believe in, have that faith, and that can really make huge changes. For example, I've heard it in so many of your videos, like, for example, when you say one thank you to someone, and that smile that you get from the other person, how beautiful it is. Just
Mm-hmm.
changes the day for both the people. Maybe you just go and ask a random person, hey, how's your day going? They weren't expecting anybody to come and ask them, but you did. And that just makes everything so beautiful. So this is the kind of a impact that your generosity and goodness or kindness can have on people.
100%. And your podcast and your show is talking about simplifying life, and it just resonates with me because in today's world, I think a lot of the messages and a lot of the things that tell us is that we need to be more complicated, and we need to find more ways to do things, and we need to find another self-help book or another podcast or another show. Um, we need more and more resources, and I really don't think that's the case. I think many of us are equipped with what we need to live a fulfilling life. We have
Mm.
skills and gifts and things that we're capable of contributing to. And I talk a lot about leadership with the organizations that I speak with, and the leadership often talks to me and says, well, how do I instill that confidence in my people? And I said, well, um, your job is to not necessarily, like, I think people in businesses and organizations think they need to give, like, tangible items and things for people to be successful. And I don't necessarily think that's always the case. A lot of times you have to give people the environment that they need to believe that what they have is good enough and that they're capable and they're ultimately confident. And and even if you're not in a corporate business environment, even if you're just yourself sitting in front of the computer right now, or you're doing the dishes, or it's Saturday afternoon, you're listening to the Simplifying Life podcast with Kashida, and you're just, you're vacuuming, and you're thinking to yourself, what do I need to be more confident in what I have? I think it's less is more. It's about figuring out how you can use what you have to contribute, because you're immensely capable. I think everyone has their own special set of gifts and skills. And it's not about finding more and needing more resources. You're infinitely capable right now of using. Think about those things, the people in your life that you already impact, in your family and other people around you that you'll already do things for. You're likely already doing great things, and maybe you're just not acknowledging them. and maybe those messages that the world tell us that what you're doing is not, you need to do more, is really telling you the wrong thing. Maybe you're already doing something great. And that's why journaling and writing these things down, as we talked about, are important, because I think sometimes when you do something over and over again, you don't realize how important that is, how critical it is. I heard a story about a gentleman not too long ago who worked 40 something years for his company, and he wasn't a CEO, he wasn't a manager, he was just an ordinary employee, if you will. And he went to work for 40 years doing the same things over and over again. And it wasn't until his retirement party that a bunch of people, wrote some notes to him and thanked him for all the things that he did over the years and how he made their job so much easier. And they got all the recognition. And the guy said that his retirement party, he was nervous that he was retiring, because he's like, well, what am I going to do with my life now? Like, I don't even have, I don't know what to do. I can't work anymore. I'm getting too old. But he was really nervous, and they told him, and how they thanked him in the notes that they wrote him and what they told him verbally at the retirement party. He said it changed his life. He went from thinking that he had this job that he just kind of had to do over the years, and he realized the impact that he was making. And it took him 40 years to realize that the skills that he displayed every day at his work were extremely powerful for hundreds of people, if not thousands, over that period of time. And in one way, that's a great story, because the guy suddenly realized this, and now he could go into retirement feeling super confident that the work that he did over the years was impactful to the world. But in another way, it's kind of sad that this guy went to work every day for 40 years, not even realizing how important he was. And doing the same things over and over again. If you're doing the same things over and over again, that in my experience, Kashira, that usually means that you're really good at them and they're really, really important, not that they're monotonous and it's just you wasting time. So if you feel like you maybe aren't making an impact in the world, consider the things that you already do every day, and you'd be surprised in how much of an impact you're making. I think it's really, really, really important to acknowledge.
Absolutely. That's so true.
Yeah,
go ahead.
It just makes me think about the importance of consistency in our lives. And I know you like to talk a lot about feeling comfortable with the things that you do or the experiences that you have in life. And that you're not going to have an explanation for everything. Some things happen. Sometimes plans get changed, or I just left. I just got back from it. I was away for about a month traveling, and I know you shared things about flight experiences before. I've seen travel. Yeah. You can learn some amazing lessons from travel, by the way. You can learn cultural lessons. You could learn stuff about language, but you can also learn about organization and customer service. And I mean, think about how many people you rely on when you're traveling from place to place. And I've learned that I could easily get frustrated on situations arise and happen when you're relying on so many different people. But if you think about it, to me, it's really amazing. It's really amazing how so many things can work together. And our world is so complicated in some ways, but it just always comes back to simplicity to me, with just taking that next step and doing it the right way. Having the right interaction, being kind, saying the right thing to the next person. You don't have to think about 20 steps ahead, just thinking about doing what's right in the moment. Otherwise, it can seem really, really overwhelming. And we were traveling on our way home, and if I go back and I think about all the steps that we had to take to actually get back to where I'm sitting right now, it could honestly be overwhelming. You go to the next plane, you follow the next direction on your itinerary. And if that's not a good example of life and work and business and personal interactions with people, You know, if you got someone who's hurting or struggling in your life, you can't solve all their problems overnight. But if you just do the one little thing for them next, that's the right step. And it's the same thing for yourself if you're in a tough time. I don't know about you, Kashira, but when I wake up, on a Monday morning per se, and I have a lot of work to do that week, it could be overwhelming to think, man, I got 5 days and I got to get all this stuff done. To me, that's not the way to think about it. You got to think about what's the one next step? How can I do the next one thing really, really well? And then you move on from there.
True, true. I like to think about me that I am highly aware of things, of my surroundings, and what all I've learned through the phases of my life. That has really taught me a lot about life and how to actually simplify it. In spite of being so much aware of things, even I got into a difficult situation just last week. There was something at work, and few things weren't tying up the way I expected it, and that started bothering me. Okay, so this is what I have learned, that you don't really have to get bothered. You have to look at, okay, what has been communicated, what is to be the outcome, and you further do the communication, what is relevant. But I was stuck. I was like, God, why am I stuck in that situation? Why, I'm working on something else, but mentally I'm somewhere there only, because that is bothering me. So basically, what I need to do is I need to sit with myself and tend to that problem. Give all the attention to that problem, hear it out, and see what is the best outcome. I didn't talk to anybody outside because I just could not take that issue to anybody else. I sat with myself and I said, okay, this is my problem. Why this is happening? What are the possible outcomes? How can we figure it out and how can I sort it out? And when I put it that clearly in front of me, within few seconds I was out of it. Okay. And that challenge, that situation, that didn't bother me at all. So everything remained the same. But then I was able to give that peace of mind to myself that, okay, this is why this is happening. So, how so many of us, we get stuck in that net, in that trap that there's something wrong, or maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe because of me, things are not going right. So many of these assumptive things that we have about ourselves. Instead, if you have some problem at hand, look at it clearly, break it down into pieces, you'll have the solution right in front of you. So basically, just simplify it.
Yes. No, I'm right with you. And I know a lot of the, things that you share and your information and insight really is a lot of times about simplifying, asking simple questions, taking that next small step. And it's so powerful. I believe strongly that simpler and smaller is often better. Not that we don't all want a mountaintop experience and something amazing. We want hockey stick growth in our company. We want, our world to change, overnight. I understand. I mean, those big mountaintop experiences and big shifts and, massive action. I'm all about effort, and we'll find those times, throughout our journey. But I think if you can't, I always say that you can't find fulfillment in if there's no joy in the journey, there's never going to be any fulfillment in the finish. And I think those small things that you're talking about are much better for our long-term growth and sustainability. And that's because you actually learn from those situations. So, there's a lot of talk about. Another thing that I like to say is that failures are hurdles of success, meaning that, sometimes when you don't do well, you learn the lesson. There's a positive outcome or a silver lining to even the biggest of dark clouds. But let's be honest. I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat it. You can't fail all the time and expect to make progress. So the idea is not that failures are all you want, and if you just keep failing, you'll keep learning. Because if you keep learning but you never implement what you've learned, you're never going to make any progress. So I don't want to be, I don't want to indicate that that's the case. The way I look at it is this: instead of we're not shooting for failure, That's obvious. Now you can find lessons in the failure, like I said, so don't take this the wrong way. But it's not that you want to fail more. It's that what you want, to me, is you want incremental progress, because those small wins are the best. I would say the small wins are the best. The small failures are probably next because they don't set you back too much. You still learn a lesson. And then even below that would be those big wins, right? Because the big wins, in my experience, a lot of times you don't learn very much from them, because the reason why the win was so big is because there was some kind of, A, if you call it serendipity, maybe B, you call it luck, or maybe there was just some situation that allowed you to have that big success, which is fine. You should take it and run with it. Don't get me wrong. Don't give it back. Experience it. But you're not going to ultimately learn the true lesson from that, because there was some kind of extenuating circumstances that worked out in your favor. It's those small wins, those little things that you do that you can say, okay, this is exactly why this worked well. And especially if you're in business, I learned this applies in spades. It's when those little things go well, it pays. This is why journaling and taking time to review the things that have happened is really, really important, because those small wins, you get the win, so you make progress, but you can also learn from the win, and that way it can be replicated. So make sure that you do those things, whether it's in personal life but specifically in business in this case, that those little things that do go well, A, you celebrate them to take advantage of the mental benefits, but also that you learn how to make that progress again and you repeat it. And there's nothing more powerful than repeatedly doing the correct thing over and over again. It's not the exciting thing. Those aren't the things that you see on TV and on the internet these days. Those are the things behind the scenes. But that's truly what builds the foundation of success and joy. And when I said that quote, or what I said earlier about finding joy in the journey will bring you fulfillment in the finish, that's really what that's all about. Finding joy in the journey is not about those mountaintop experiences and the happiest moments of your life. Happiness is simply a result of good things happening. You can increase your happiness surface area, if you will, if you find joy in the little things that you do every day to be successful.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much, Bob, for sharing your stories, your insights. This is amazing. I mean, I can say there are so many takeaways for myself, and I'm sure this is going to help out a lot of people who are going to listen to us. To conclude, I am going to ask you a very simple thing. For people who have never heard about generosity or who are not into the practice of generosity, what are few tips or few strategies that you'd like to suggest them, that this is how you can be generous to other people and how it can help you out? Just to conclude that.
Well, the first thing is to be aware, and we literally just talked about mountaintop experiences versus big things. The simplest way and the simplest thing is just to be aware of the experience of other people. And some people might call these random acts of kindness. Some people might call them just being a nice person. I'm very big on being intentional and planning things out. So nothing against the random acts of kindness, but you got to start somewhere. You have to start with just doing the thing, holding doors open for people, using words like please and thank you, acknowledging what people have done for you is such a powerful thing. So that's where I would start simply. If you want to take that next step, if you're like, all right, I already do the nice things that people do every day, the next step I would say is specifically to ask questions. And it starts right in the home. I've noticed this in my own personal life. I think sometimes I don't even realize the little things that I can do for my wife or my family, anyone else that I know. Just simply say, hey, is there anything I can do for, what are you doing today? What's going on? How can I be helpful? And I think you'd be surprised just the little things that you can do. So that would be my suggestion. Number one, be aware of other people's experience, what's going on in that moment. I don't mean like in their whole life. I just mean literally in that moment. Like the person that's helping you check out at the grocery store, what are they feeling? Can you tell? I can't tell you how many times just being thankful to the person that's helping you out, you could really change someone. Remember what we said in the beginning of the show. is you may not change the world, but you may change the world for one. So consider that. And then step two is just to ask questions.
I love this. You may not change the world. You may not be able to change the world, but you can change it for one. That's
Mhm.
amazing. Thank you so very much, Bob. I appreciate your time today. And you've just filled my remaining evening with a lot of generosity and kindness. And this is what I feel about it. This is like very addictive. I mean, I know it's a negative word, but very addictive. Once you start getting kind to people, start being generous, you start, using simple words like thank you and please, you get into that momentum, and then
Mhm.
you are like that person. So it just makes it so beautiful. Thank you so much for all your time today and insights.
Oh, you're welcome. I would say, yes, if there's one thing that you can get addicted to, I get addicted to being generous, and I think your life will change for sure. So thank you, Kashira, for having me. I look forward to more insights from you and your show, and anyone out there who's experiencing, that kind of one of those stages of life where you feel like you're just not capable of doing something. I said, there's nothing more powerful than reinforcing your ability to give. And it's true, it's cliche, but in giving is absolutely receiving. So just give a little something, and I think you'd be surprised how much you'll get back in return.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much.